and welcome back to the Purple Cloud podcast. We've got a great guest for you today, Zoey Gong or Xinyi Gong, who is someone I've been following on Instagram for quite a while now. She is a Chinese medicine practitioner specializing in the field of Chinese medical dietetics. And her Instagram is filled with beautiful, colorful pictures of all the delicious, healthy foods she's been making and explanations of how it fits into the Chinese medical paradigm. And when I saw she was going to be doing a seminar with my friends at Global Branches, I thought it would be fantastic to have her on the podcast and have a talk about all things Chinese medical food related. And in our conversation, we get into a wide variety of topics such as cooling foods, damp constitutions, fasting, fad diets in the West, and much, much more. And for anyone interested in taking part in Zoey's online seminar on TCM food therapy, the information can be found at globalbranches.com. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. I'd like to welcome Zoey or Xinyi Gong to the podcast today. I don't know Zoey very well, but I've been following her Instagram page with great interest for some time. It's one of the few places I've seen some real information on Chinese medicine dietetics in the West that doesn't really borrow a lot from Western medicine nutrition. So, yeah, welcome, Zoey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danielle.
And I understand you've done quite a bit of study in nutrition in the past. Is that right?
Yeah. So my first background, my first career was medical nutrition. I interned in a hospital. I went to college for nutrition and dietetics. So, yeah, I did a lot of Western nutrition.
And what got you into the Chinese medicine side of things?
You know, it's kind of a long story, but I think when I was working in the hospital, I didn't like what I was seeing. You know, I felt what I was doing wasn't helpful for my patients. And also at the same time, I was doing, healthy cooking, kind of culinary work, but very strictly based on Western nutrition. And I found the things I could do was getting more and more restrictive. And it was also kind of getting boring for me. You know, I was tired of making the avocado toast, the salads, the juices. So I wanted to explore something more. And with experience in the hospital where I saw myself just judging a patient based on a number, giving them food based on a number, and seeing my efforts weren't working for them. And that's kind of like, I guess, a waking moment for me to find something else that, may be more helpful for my patients and also bring more joy to my work. And I'm Chinese. I was, born and raised in China, in Shanghai. And so naturally, I guess I wanted to look back to my culture to see what it has to offer. And I really just started with reading the Asian recipes because of my culinary work. I want to see what the Asian Chinese were doing. And just by reading the recipes, I saw there so much description about seasonality, about body constitution, about, healing in these food recipes. And I was extremely interested. So I started to dig deeper and eventually started to pursue Chinese medicine professionally. I went to school and all that. And it has been so fascinating. And I started to use the principles for myself. And it has been helping me a whole lot as well, especially in terms of women's health. I was dealing with menstruation issues before I, was taking, before I got into TCM. But with the herbs and acupuncture, it has been really good so far. Yeah, so I guess this is a brief story of how I got into TCM.
That's interesting. There's quite a lot to unpack there. So when you were talking about working in the hospitals, I can kind of relate to that. I worked in a lot of oncology departments doing acupuncture, but felt quite frustrated and limited as to what I could do there. When you said numbers, you mean like, I don't know really how the Western medical nutrition works, but it's a lot of blood tests, this kind of thing, looking at levels and then maybe, I don't know, adapting diets. I'm just curious.
That's one part.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one part of it, right? Of course, you look at blood sugar and all that. That's actually the good part. I guess the number I mean is, okay, this patient gives them 2,000 calories. You calculate a calorie number for them, right? And then you calculate the protein, you calculate the carbohydrates, but the food we give them were what, like protein shakes that's full of additives, full of refined sugar, and all that things. So I was just thinking, how can if the number is right, but the actual food wasn't right, how is it gonna work, right? And how can everyone eat the same number? So everybody would just recommend 2,000 calories for everyone. I mean, but everybody's so different. How is this right? And also, I had a lot of patients coming from different cultural backgrounds, and we weren't able to accommodate that. So, I guess mostly meaning the number, meaning a standard that is kind of a one number fits all, which I didn't like.
Yeah, right. I can understand how that would be really, really restrictive. And then, and then you moved into sort of also talking about the cultural element of it. And something I often see in clinic, especially in the West, is the enjoyment of food as well gets sort of left behind. Like especially if you're having things like protein shakes and that. And I think that emotional and psychological connection with food is also maybe something I think something that's quite important, but gets maybe left behind a little bit when you're looking at numbers on a page. So when you started looking at all these recipes, I'm curious, is there anything that really sort of took your attention, and like what sort of recipe books are we talking? A modern sort of Chinese things or a little bit older?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think the first one I picked up was Yang Xiaolu. It's kind of like a cookbook written in the Qing Dynasty by Gu Chong. And it is not necessarily like a wellness or healing or medicinal book at all. It's just kind of a recipe book. But I was reading it, and at first I was surprised by how beautiful the language was. It's very poetic and it's such a pleasant read. And then there was a lot of mentioning about seasonality. So the author talks about, you should pick this fruit during this season and then dry it in the next month and then eat it during that season. And it is the best for the season because it can, maybe, let's say, it can reduce dryness or stuff like that. And It also talks about a little bit about the body constitution here and there. They will say, okay, this food is, let's say, cooling, so it can, be really great if you're heated or, some idea like that. And I was, at that time, I didn't really know too much about traditional Chinese medicine. I was like, okay, I understood a little bit, but I didn't get the full picture. But now looking back, I think it was so amazing.
And in your cultural background, did your parents and grandmother use this sort of language growing up when you, I don't know, had a cold or eating certain things?
Yeah, definitely. So something is cold, something is cool, something is cooling. It's really definitely in the language. But we only know, I guess, the surface of it. Like an average Chinese person, they will understand that they're heated or they're cold, but only the surface of it. And I grew up with my grandparents, actually, so they used many herbs and foods like goji berry, jujube dates, and all those dried mushrooms. So it's very familiar for me. And even in herb class, I've heard of most of the name of the herb. Even if I didn't know what it was, I recognize it just by hearing the name. So I think I'm lucky, to study Chinese medicine, because a lot of the medicine, I always say this, a lot of the medicine, especially for food therapy, is already in the language. So I actually recommend any Chinese practitioner to also study Chinese, because just by saying these everyday sentences, you're going to be able to understand the medicine a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I see a lot of I'm wondering how you deal with things like, because even in the West, in the Chinese medicine classes, they're taught things like, don't eat cold foods because it'll damage the spleen and this kind of thing. And you go to China, they do eat salad stuff. Like you've got pai huanggua with a little bit of chili, and you eat that, the smashed cucumbers, and you'll eat that in summer, and a whole range of liang cai, the cold dishes and stuff. So I'm wondering your take on, because there is a lot of dogma in the culture around that, like strict rules, but that don't seem to be followed. So I'm wondering what your understanding of this, especially I guess cold foods, what your take on this is, and when to use them, when not to use them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's such a great question. In general, Chinese medicine, as you said, doesn't like anything raw, right? But in Chinese cuisine, we have plenty of raw stuff, and these are seasonal foods, mostly in the summer. Let's say the cucumber, a salad dish, and a lot of the cold dishes, let's say almost like a raw mung bean, or what other raw things do we eat? Like some wild vegetables, we eat them raw. And usually, if you think about it, first of all, these are usually consumed in hot weather or a region where it is hot, like Canton or Taiwan. And then you think about the sauces that's paired with these raw dishes. Let's say you just said the chili that goes with the cucumber. So there's always kind of like a balance to balance out the cold nature of it. There are a lot of balance in Chinese cuisine, I think. And I also don't like the rule that raw things is just bad or you shouldn't eat anything cold. I really don't think that. I personally think there are a lot of nutrients to be found in raw foods, but the percentage of it should be controlled. I think in everyday diet, if you're living in a climate with 4 seasons year round, you can eat a little bit more in the summer and obviously less in winter, and maybe do 10 to 15% of raw foods, or even less, maybe 10% raw foods a day or something like that, just to find a balance. Just don't do it 100% raw. That's something I wouldn't recommend unless you want to do it in a very short period of time. And if you're a very heated person, then maybe you can do it, as a therapeutic method for a short period of time.
Yeah, you must see a lot of these. I mean, I see these patients as well, but you must see a lot of them in the West, raw food advocates, the celery juice thing. And, in the short term, they often get really great results from them. Yeah. And then after a while, it starts to, it starts to have other issues. And I'm wondering what you think of these, all these, because there are so many diets in the West. You've got everything from vegan to carnivore, everything in between. And I mean, yeah, you've talked about balance a little bit, but I'd love to hear your take on these Western diets.
Totally. These diets are very interesting, and I personally, as someone who's very curious, have tried many of them just to feel it firsthand. But honestly, none of them made me feel very good long term. Or like, so for example, I think all these diets works, in short term because it brings people's awareness. They make people aware of what they're eating. Whatever the diet is, when people are on a diet, they automatically start to eat healthier, start to pay attention to read the ingredient list. So actually, I think the major benefit is from the fact that they're aware. That is what these diets can bring. And secondly, I think that their diet never works long term, or it's never sustainable because it is too restricting.
Right.
It's like controls your life. It controls your social life, and it gets boring and tiresome after you do it for a while. And more importantly, if your culture, you have another culture. Let's say if you are Brazilian, Portuguese, or Chinese, Japanese, your food are not designed to fit into these kind of diets. And the most information of these diets are based on a healthy Americanized or a healthy European diet. Then in order to do that, you're giving up a lot of cultural foods. And I think that takes a lot of joy out of life, takes your family, takes the tradition out of your life, which I don't like. And then if we talk about actually the medicinal aspect of these diets, if it's keto, whether it's raw, whether it's vegan, they're kind of on the extreme side, right? If you're talking about yin and yang, they are either too yang or too yin, either too cold or too heated or too drying. Short term, it's totally fine. Short term, I mean, it can be up to 1 to 2 months, which I still consider as pretty short term. But if you do it longer, it's gonna cause imbalance in your body that can make you feel tired. And it works for some people really well because, maybe this person is very heated, as I said, and he tried a raw diet and it's magic, right? Because it happens to balance his constitution. So if you want to try these diets, you also kind of need to understand what your constitution is. And because everybody is so different, and so I don't recommend everyone to try a diet just because it's trendy. This is my take on these crazy diets.
Okay, and what about the intermittent fasting? That's one I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah. I actually, among all of those, this is the one that I actually like. I think there is definitely value in intermittent fasting. And in TCM, at least in Chinese culture, we don't say it is bad. Think about the Buddhist time, the monks. We have something in our culture, even in Taoist history, there's something called Beagle.
Beagle, yeah.
Beagle, right? And that's how they don't eat for, after 12 or for a long period of time with very little calorie intake. And, traditionally they use like jujube dates or licorice when they're really hungry to kind of sustain their energy. And I think it's good because first of all, there are a lot of research behind it. And secondly, I tried it, as all the other diets. And I found that one is actually helping me to focus more, to feel lighter. I still do it sometimes when I have a long window of not eating. I don't do extreme intermittent fast. I don't do extreme fasting, let's say a week of eating no foods. I did also because of the nature of my work as a chef, it's practically impossible. But sometimes I do.
Too much temptation.
Yeah, and you gotta cook, right? You gotta cook for people, cook for your work. So it's kind of impossible, and you have to taste when you cook.
Sure.
So otherwise, I don't think you cook good food. So going back, I would eat for, let's say, 8 hours and have the rest, or eat for 6 hours and have the rest hours of no eating, just drinking non-caffeinated beverage, usually herbal teas, and it has been really good for me. I wonder, have you tried it? What is your thought on it?
I like it. I think we eat too much as a culture anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's interesting. It's something I want to look back on in China a lot more, because I've heard people say, oh, the Beagle thing, it's not the same as intermittent fasting because they did it for spiritual purposes. But then recently I found out one of the Qing emperors I think he was eating nothing after 12, and that was for health reasons. So I reckon there is a tradition of it somewhere in China. I don't know. I need to do more research on the actual Beagle tradition. Like, I'm sure there are health reasons in it as well. I think people need to, maybe there's a deeper dive on it, because I have heard people say, oh, it's not the same thing, but they,
Yeah, I know. And also nowadays there are like big camps where they bring people to do the Beagle and charge them money and all that, which makes it whole different thing, which I don't think it is what it should be. And I do think traditionally it's definitely, as you said, a religious reason for better meditation, better focus. But I do think there's definitely healing reasons too.
Yeah, there was a practitioner in Sydney who put everyone on these fasts, and they'd go for ages. They'd go for weeks. And I think he did it to one diabetic person, and they ended up getting really sick. And I don't know the story behind it, but I don't know where he got the idea from, but he was from Harbin, I think. So he was bringing something from China and this idea from China. So I don't know where it came from, but I think there's more to it than just saying, oh, it's just a religious tradition and it's not like what we're doing in the West. I think there's definite overlap there. Yeah.
100%. Food therapy has so much actually overlap with modern nutrition too.
Like what else? What else have you come across in that?
Field? The most basic concepts are extremely similar, and I think it's very advanced. For example, Chinese medicine talk about eating less meat, more plants, right? I mean, it's what we talk about nowadays too. And it talks about eating a variety of foods, eating the rainbow. In the West, you call it rainbow diet, right? Eat rainbow, and in Chinese medicine, you call it eating the 5 colors, which is basically the same thing. And also, even you look at these kind of the recent trendy wellness foods, a lot of them, the Chinese people have been eating them for a long time, starting from bone broth, right? You know how what a big role that TCM bone broth plays in Chinese culture. And also I was just reading another recipe book the other day, and I saw people already making nut milk, almond milk.
Oh, really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing. When was that?
I know. I believe that's also the Qing dynasty.
Yeah, cool.
And they were using the Chinese almonds, Xingren, the Chinese medicine almonds, to make an almond milk. And then they also even preserve the byproduct, the leftover, to grind it into a flour. And then they say you can make it into a steam bun. This kind of idea.
Have you tried that yet?
Even the recipe?
Yeah.
No, I haven't tried it.
Okay.
I should try it soon.
Yeah, something for the gram.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. Also, Xingren, gotta be a little bit more careful because if people don't cook them well, they can be a little bit toxic.
Sure.
But it's the exact same idea as nut milk. And the ironic thing is that Chinese people now started to go back to nut milk because it has been so popular in the West. In China, it has been mostly just dairy milk and soy milk. And just in recent years, I would say 2 to 3 years, all the oat milk and almond milk started to be so trendy. People would import it from the US or Europe to have it because they know it seems to be the up and coming wellness foods.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of it's very interesting phenomenon.
That's amazing. And there's and there's like with the Xingren, but there's so much overlap between Chinese medicine and the food. It's almost because of these flavors. And I mean, you mentioned having a variety of varied diet, and now we know that with the gut bacteria, you get a much more varied gut bacteria, which is a healthy thing. And totally. Yeah, 100%. And also, there are a lot of fermented foods and TCM food therapy. Although we actually don't talk about it as a group, but a lot of the condiments that are fermented traditionally, and the Chinese people use those to season their vegetables and to add the benefits of healthy bacteria for the digestion. What are some of your, I mean, I know recently there's the pao cai kimchi controversy going on in fermented foods between Korea and China. I don't know if you've seen some of that, but there's a bit of a argument about who did it first. But I was just going to ask, what are some of your favorite fermented foods?
Fermented foods, right? I mean, first of all, soy sauce is a fermented product.
Sure.
It should be, even though nowadays the ones on your shelf are not anymore. But traditionally, they are fermented with really clean ingredients. And that's why in food therapy, they have this a little bit cooling, a little bit softening quality to them. But if you buy a soy sauce, like a cheap one in your grocery store right now, they don't have this quality anymore because they were not fermented. There are food colors in them and all the things that you don't want to have in your body. And then again, I love fermented tofu as well. There are also a lot of controversy around soy nowadays, which I think is a little bit exaggerated. But these controversies will go away if it's fermented soy, usually. So fermented tofu is something I would recommend people to have, and it's also very clean. Usually you see the ingredients is just the tofu, salt, water, and maybe a little bit rice wine in there. And it's super tasty, umami, and great for you with the bacteria.
Is there a soy sauce brand you can recommend, or one that does have the fermentation and these sort of medicinal aspects to it? Or is it for me, I have a trusted brand that I already started using back in Shanghai. They're called Heran. Sometimes you can find it in Asian markets, but you have to really got to be careful and read Chinese to be able to know what is good. But the general rule is you look at the bottle, first flip to the ingredient. The ingredient should always just be water, soy sauce. If it's not gluten-free, then it has wheat and salt. That is it. There shouldn't be anything else. And also, if there is an organic symbol, you will see organic. I mean, that there's a plus. And always looking for words that says traditional fermentation or long fermentation and words like that to make sure that it is good. Yeah, it is a little tricky. So my goal, for 5 seasons, my brand is to one day we can carry a soy sauce that is affordable and also of good quality. Yeah, I hope you're able to do that. Getting back to the medicinal overlap, I mean, the big part of it is when I don't think it's emphasized so much in a lot of modern TCM schools, but I think the further back you go, the flavors of the herbs, the Chinese herbs, are what are the big components. It's a really important part of herbal medicine. I would say one of the foundations of it, and that completely translates into food. And like you said, there are so many things that overlap. I remember one of the first experiences that got me realizing the power of the food therapy was my first autumn living in Beijing. and so dry there. Like your washing will dry in, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's super dry. And I started getting these like toothaches in my wisdom teeth, and I thought, I'm going to have to get my wisdom teeth out. I never had tooth problems before. And I was like, I booked a dentist appointment, and my martial arts teacher told me, oh no, it's just autumn. You eat pears, you'll be fine. And I'm like, no, that's, I mean, I know the theory, Shanghuo, it's the heat in the teeth and all of this, but I thought there's no way. It's like, I need my teeth pulled. I ate only pears for 2 days, and it completely disappeared. And I was like, oh wow. And they're the proper Asian pears, which we can't really get in Australia, but they're very moist.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
really?
I know,
You can get that in Australia?
Tricky.
There is a big Asian population now in Australia.
You can get them in the Asian supermarkets, but in general, they're not as easy to find, which is a real pity. A real pity because I'm a big fan. They've got real medicinal benefits. And I'm just wondering if you knew of any of these other overlap, these foods that can have if you have any stories like this of a food that has a real strong medicinal benefit with your clients or yourself. Like you mentioned your menstruation issues, if there was anything there that has really helped heal you or heal your patients, like you mentioned the menstruation thing, and I'm wondering what role food played in helping you recover from that. And any really interesting stories of singular foods or diets that have helped?
100%. So menstruation is huge, and food therapy for menstruation is really huge. So for my pattern, I was deficient in qi, and I had also a little bit deficiency in blood and also heat in the blood. So what I did was having chicken broth daily, and in there I put astragalus, like 20 grams to 30 grams of astragalus, dangshan, poor man's ginseng, 15 grams, a little bit fuling, 15 grams, and a couple of jujube dates in there. And I just, make a big batch every week and drink it throughout the week. It does wonders, I feel also more energetic, and I also use the same recipe, or sometimes I modify it to a Bajan combination for patients to bring back their period or make their period more smooth, less painful. It has been very, very successful, and it's all it takes is just to boil a big pot of soup, and you can have something very enjoyable and tasty. And that is one thing. Another example would be, let's say, the morning sickness, or you're on a boat, you feel very sick or nausea. I think we all know the zisuye shiso is fantastic for it. So usually we make a morning porridge, right, with a little bit of a sliced ginger, fresh sisal leaf. You chop them up, and then you can add them to oatmeal or millet or brown rice porridge and stuff like that for morning sickness for pregnant moms are very, very helpful. And it's also just, very tasty too.
Yeah, sure.
Examples like that. So many. And as you said, a lot of the cooling things can be very, very good for some kind of I myself call it like acute heat symptoms, kind of like 上火, it's just happens short term, and the onset is really just like suddenly, right? You get it. So with that, pear can do if it's also has dryness symptoms, or something like 鱼腥草 or some wild herbs, wild vegetables just make a salad. So also you can buy a purslane 马齿苋 here in Union Square Farmers Market or in Chinatown or even in Whole Foods sometimes, and then you make a salad with it, and then just eat it for, let's say, 3 days consecutively, and also at the same time avoiding cooking methods like grilling, baking, roasting, avoiding eating baked goods or drying breads and stuff like that. And it brings a huge difference, huge relief for people.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. And one thing I think I see a lot of these days in clinic, possibly because of we eat very rich diets. I think in the West, a lot of dampness. I think I see a lot, and in general, it's probably not just the diet, but I'm wondering how you deal with that, or if you notice similar things, and if in your patients, and what sort of dietary advice you give to those sort of patients.
Yeah, totally. Dampness is one of the biggest things now, and that's why first I tell them the big food groups that is and big cooking methods that's good for reducing dampness. So first is you have multigrains. I ask them to make a multigrain blend, or think about 5 whole grain they're gonna have in a week. Most people nowadays only have oats as their whole grain source, just one. But I would recommend a mix of millet, oats, let's say purple rice, let's say add some legume in there too, let's say mung bean, let's say kidney beans. Kind of choose 5 legume and whole wheat combination to make porridge or make rice with, or even switch the pasta into a black bean pasta or chickpea pasta. That is one thing. Another thing is adding root vegetables, colorful root vegetables, and vegetables with plenty of fiber can be really good. And another thing is to have herbs like lotus seeds, 芡实, fox nuts, 薏仁 obviously is extremely tasty as well. Using these, they can either boil tea or add fuling into a broth with the 薏仁, with azuki beans, with the fox nuts and lotus seeds together, can be really good in terms of draining dampness. This kind of idea, and also avoiding the things that can contribute to dampness, let's say very oily foods, right? Especially animal fats, a little bit less, and also focus on to build their spleen, build their digestion. So less, distraction when ealing. Eat a little bit slower and things like that.
Right. And how do you deal? So how do you deal with, because I imagine a lot of people will have a reaction to that, because anything carb is a dirty word in a lot of circles in the West now. And I imagine, so how do you deal with you tell someone to eat 5 different sorts of grains, and they're coming at it from this kind of ketogenic diet mindset, which is, it's very popular in Australia. I don't know. I think in America too these days.
It is also very popular. Yeah.
So how do you deal with that in clinic?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely get questions like that. But the idea that carb is bad really is actually the idea that bad carb is bad, or refined carb is bad. Carb is not created equal. So it would just take a little bit time for us to explain to our patients that, the carb they need to avoid are refined carb or simple carb, like a pizza dough or a white bread, or their desserts, or white rice, and the carb they actually can have, and it will be benefit them hugely will be the whole grains, the complex carb, such as the millet, such as these whole grains that's raw and you can cook at home. That is the best, because even if you buy whole wheat bread out there, there are, 50%, they only use 20% of the whole grain flour. So which means you're actually still eating the carb that you want to avoid. And also a lot of the carb nowadays are leavened with commercial yeast, which actually can bring our can be hard to digest, because think about it, bread were not supposed to be rising so fast. It's nowadays the bread are all like post-industrial kind of products. Before then, the way to make bread is sourdough from natural yeasts. And if you can get that and the bread made with a whole grain, like 100% whole grain flour, I would say bread is a very nice thing to have. And also you can show them, if they are more if they want to hear a little bit more Western scientific language, or they understand that a little bit better, maybe you can talk to them about the glycemic index, about how those complex carb can maintain their blood sugar better, and how our body actually needs these carbs to build our brain and all these important things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's some good tips in there.
And even TCM, one of the first things they mention in 黄帝内经 is about eating the 5 grains, the multi-grains,
Yeah. They had a diverse diet back then. And also you mentioned a few times about the seasonality of the food, and I mean that's an important topic in all of Chinese medicine, the seasons and everything. I'm wondering how and these days I think in so many ways we're removed from the seasons, but I mean, with the heating and cooling of, air conditioning and all of that kind of thing, but also in our diets, we don't know, like we're getting food shipped from all over the world, so far removed from a seasonal diet. I'm wondering what you see the effects of that are, and maybe some of your how you stick to a more seasonal patterns and that kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. It has become harder and harder to eat seasonally. So first of all, the easiest thing to do, if you have a farmer's market around you, shop over there. Usually it is right in terms of fresh produce. And also, there are a lot of actually sources on internet to search for your local seasonal foods. It's also very important to eat locally as well, because we all have different climates. Therefore, our seasons are quite different. Let's say, us, right? Australia and the US can be very different from each other. So it is very important to understand your season, and then kind of find, if you want to follow TCM, so find the seasonal points of TCM that corresponds to your season. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. For example, if you only live in the climate, let's say tropical climate that with only humid summer, they are going to refer to the late summer or summer diet of traditional Chinese medicine, rather than focus on eating winter foods in December. And the way to stick to it, again, find your local seasonal foods, and secondly, you can totally look into seasonal herbs, because dried foods and herbs are also seasonal. For example, we are saying goodbye to spring here in New York. We're going to the hot summer, so cooling herbs is going to take their role. Herbs that can quite calm the shen, such as 酸枣仁 sour jujube seeds, such as some lily bulb, such as honeysuckle, monk fruit, Longhangguo, and the dampness reducing things that we talk about is going to be used more and more in our daily eating. But then in Australia, I think it's the opposite, right?
Yep,
so you're going to
We've had a
going
cold
to
snap.
winter. Yeah. So you can start to take out all the dried herbs, like dried spices, like dinxiang, right, clove, like a little bit cinnamon, like the 5-spice blend, star anise, even the 13-spice blend. I don't know if you can find that in Asian markets. It's a fantastic spice blend made with 13 TCM herbs and spices.
Oh, I'll have to have a look for that one. I've not heard of that.
Yeah. I actually have a story of that blend. It's usually used with dumplings, or you usually use it with lamb because it's also, wintry cold weather foods.
Right.
So dumpling was actually designed to be a medicine rather than a food item.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was this TCM doctor back then. It's really early, it's almost, I think it's 春秋战国 era. So before all the Tang Dynasty and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this doctor was seeing that there was this area with a lot of peasants, with a lot of farmers, poor people, not educated people, and they were very cold. They started to have cold sores on their ears, on their hands. And he at first was trying to offer medicine, but you know how bad the TCM decoction tastes.
Sure.
So the farmers were like, oh no, we're gonna have none of that. It's too disgusting. So he was thinking, what can I do? And what can I do in a cheaper way rather than boiling these expensive herbs? So he thought about this spice. He's using this kind of spice blend to put them into a meat filling, and then he wraps this inside of a wheat skin, which is basically a dumpling. And then he set up a huge pot outside. And then he said, come on, we have free food for you. So the farmers went, they have the, free food, and it's quite tasty and a little bit spicy, and they loved it. And they go back again and again. And after a week, their cold sores are gone. And they saw the cold sores are gone. It's so tasty. So they started to make it, in their home, and share with villagers outside of their region, and it slowly becomes the dumplings nowadays.
Yeah, right. I've never heard that story before.
Yeah.
I have no idea if it's historically accurate, but I think it's great. There's a lot in there. It's a good way to treat flexibly. I like that. Work with your patients to get something they can take. I think that's awesome. I love that story.
Yeah, 100%. And if you look into, especially Qing Dynasty, when there are more recording of food therapy, in the Forbidden Palace, if you look at their recipe book, they have a special, a sub department in the kitchen where they do medicinal foods. So the chefs work closely with the TCM doctors for the emperor, the empress, for all the princes, like the wives and all that. And they have a recipe book to target different issues. And they're very tasty recipes, and they solve problems.
That's
as well.
Awesome. And have you got a recipe book of your own in the works, or?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm writing a cookbook called Soak. It will be a beginner's guide to incorporate TCM into our daily eating.
Oh, that's amazing.
It will be out in 2023.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, exciting.
It is. I don't think there's too much out there because there's a lot of the information out there is a bit contradictory on the dietetic front, and it's in the Chinese medicine field, and it'd be nice to get some more solid info out there. And
100%.
Speaking of which, you are doing a online seminar with Global Branches, who are friends of the Purple Cloud Institute. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you'll be teaching and the details of that. Yeah,
totally. I'm very excited for that program. So it will be an 8-hour program and designed for actually practitioners or someone who already know about TCM, or maybe a student. And the goal of it is to kind of fill in the blank, because I know that food therapy is taught very little, at least in TCM schools, in many TCM schools in the US. And I think it's such a big part of TCM, actually. And I do think it can be a really great tool for practitioners to incorporate this as at least as part of the education for their patients. So I will be teaching, the first class will be reviewing the basic concepts of TCM food therapy. And then, the second class will be, we're going to talk about the body constitutions and specific application of food therapy for these specific body constitutions, such as damp heat, such as yin deficiency, yang deficiency, and so on. And the third class, I will do some demos, some introduce individual. I will pick 10 to 15, really important, effective food medicine herb to show the students, and also to show several ways of using these herbs along with some recipes, and also showcase some cooking methods that's beyond stir frying or beyond roasting or baking. And the last class will be a case study. As if you're learning at school, we have a case and we would discuss some treatments and see the best recipe for this patient to take. I think it would be such a fun class for people. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's really not much like that out there, so I'm really happy they're putting this on, and you're able to share your knowledge with a wide audience in the TCM community. Yeah,
thank you. You also seem very knowledgeable and you speak really good Chinese. So I'm wondering, have you used any foods, I guess, in your life or for your, I don't know if you treat patients, but...
Not as much as I would like. It's a whole other thing. I would like to, and I've had ideas of... Yeah, it's something I'd like to ask, like how a patient's diet. Do you get them to tell you the diet, or you get them to write a few things down? Because patients are often a bit... They don't always tell you the complete truth about these things, which I notice.
Right.
I give a bit of dietary advice, but certainly nothing as comprehensive as what you're doing.
Right. So I guess because I had the nutrition background, we do a lot of nutrition consultations, starting from the diet recall and all that techniques to kind of get your patients to tell you the truth.
So you get them to record it over a week or two. Is that right?
Sometimes, but this is actually not an effective method because they don't do it usually. They forget about it. It's too much work for them.
Sure.
So usually you get the general idea, or you talk through with them, and they often forget a lot about a lot of things. They will tell you they eat 3 things a day, but actually they ate 30 and forget about it. So it's all actually about taking 10 to 15 minutes. If you decide to do a food therapy kind of session with them, then take about 10 to 15 minutes to talk through their day, and to get a general sense about what they know about food. If what their diet over a week is like, asking them how many vegetables you eat per week, and they're going to start to count, like, oh, I don't really eat that much, and starting from there. And again, if you don't have time in a clinic, if you're doing just acupuncture and things like that, you can just recommend them some things to do, like 1 or 2 things to do, or 1 or 2 things not to do based on your pattern diagnosis. That can be actually, and ask them to stick to it. Just give them a homework of doing these 2 things. And sometimes, it can bring a big benefit, like the pear, right? Like your pear story.
Sure.
Just one change can bring a lot of benefits.
Yeah. Okay. There's some good tips in there, because it is something I would like to involve more in my clinic, and I do give a little bit of advice here and there, but there's definitely more I can be doing.
Yeah. I think the key for nutrition to work is start small with most patients, because most of them don't know too much about it. So just give them 1 or 2 very specific tasks to make sure that they can do it daily or regularly, and not too challenging for them. It's important to give them like specific ideas, not just very general, eat more whole grains. They don't know what whole grains are, and it's too general and they're not going to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and get the compliance happening.
Yeah, it's very important and very hard, as you said.
Yeah,
that's one of the biggest struggle for food therapy and nutrition professionals, I think, is the compliance.
Yeah, I struggle with it ongoing. Always thinking of ways to sort of trying to get them to stick to things. So that's your program it's a 3-week or 4-week program, is that right?
Yeah, it's a 4-week program, and they are going to get a little bit homework, if they want to get more out of it after each week. But it's a four classes. Each class is 2 hours.
And they can sign up. I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's through Global Branches.
Through Global Branches, yeah.
And anyone on Instagram out there, I'd really recommend following your page because you're always, I don't know, you got great pictures and great looking food all the time and all these, little tidbits. It's really great. I still haven't got the hang of Instagram. I was told to join it, and it's color coordinated, which is fantastic. I don't know.
I didn't really actually try to color coordinate, but I guess I just like certain colors, and I tend to take pictures with these colors or even cook foods of these colors sometimes. So I guess it feels like it's color coordinated.
Oh yeah, it's very, very aesthetic. I mean, I could do a lot better on our Instagram page on that front.
Thank you. Because now people love to see beautiful things. Just to get them interested. It's important. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. On that note, I think we'll leave it there. But thanks for your time today. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daniel. Me too.
I'd once again like to thank Zoey for taking the time out to talk to us about food therapy today. And just another reminder, her seminar on TCM food therapy through Global Branches is starting on June 1st. And for more information on that, please visit their website, globalbranches.com. And I would also highly recommend following Zoey on Instagram. That's Zoey with a Y. Xinyi Gong is her name there. And on that note, I'll say bye for now. See you next time.